Good afternoon. For today's presentation, I'm going to talk about what is the most preferred assessment strategy for teachers and pupils. So we're going to talk about teacher, self and peer assessment today. So within my degree course in John Moores University, we were asked to do an action research while on placement. So the school that I used for this was Cardinal Heenan High School, and this took place between September and December 2012 while on my Phase 3 placement. So why I chose to do this was because, as Ofsted states, assessment is constantly the weakest part of teaching and learning. It involves obtaining and interpreting information about pupils' skills, knowledge and understanding of their learning needs. So with this here, I devised two research objectives. So the first research objective was, what is the most preferred assessment strategy for teachers and pupils? And the second one we talked about is, how accurate and reliable are peer and self-assessment strategies within PE lessons? The results of this here came through questionnaires, through pupil and teacher. And then at the end, we comparison of the pupil and teacher results. This is just a little bit of background information, literature material on teacher assessment. So teacher assessment involves teachers making judgments on pupils' performance, levels or grades they are working at. It also assesses pupils throughout either assessment of learning or assessment for learning. So self-assessment as well. This allows pupils to be involved in identifying gaps in their learning and steps to simplify this. It also encourages independent learners and individual reflection about what constitutes good work. So again, within Ofsted, they look to see independent learners throughout the lesson as well. Peer assessment. Peer assessment involves pupils assessing their performance of their peers. The advantage of this as well, it can improve motivation of pupils to work harder. It also develops high-level thinking through ownership of the assessment process. So again, this time they get to vision and they can peer assess with their peers. So the methodology behind this. So the aim of this action research was to assess the accuracy and reliability of peer and self-assessment strategies within the PE lesson, and to discover pupils and teachers' preferred assessment strategies. So the rationale. We hope to discover what assessment strategy is the most effective and why, so it can be used more out through PE lessons within Cardinal Heenan. So the ethical considerations. You should always allow your research proposal to be scrutinised by any ethics committee and accept their decision. Within the sampling, it was very convenient because I was on placement in the school. I could select a year group, as we picked here was the year 7s, and I chose 12 pupils within this and a boxing unit of work which they had never looked at before. This took place within the sports hall and the dance studio. The instruments used within this research were peer assessment worksheets, school grading criteria, which is in handbooks, and also we had the privilege of just purchasing 3 to 4 brand new iPads, which again were very good within the lessons. Pupils and teachers also took part in questionnaires, and this data was collected through quantitative and qualitative to answer the research objectives. Just moving on again with the methodology. This took part over a unit of work for boxing was planned and delivered over 6 to 8 lessons to develop pupils' ability to peer and self-assess. Within the peer assessment part, they looked at the combination of punches, so the hook, the jab and the uppercut, and they also, at the end of the lesson, they would think, pen, chair within the plenary. The self-assessment bit, while using the iPads, was on their stance and guard. So at the end of their 6 to 8 lessons, they were all videoed and they were able to look back and see how well they performed. Teachers' assessment of pupils' attainment and effort. All PE teachers and pupils completed a questionnaire, as I said previous, and the results were collected and collated to assess similarities, differences in teacher self and peer assessment grades and levels. Delimitations. As I said, this only happened or took place in one school, so it was study focused on the secondary school and only researched a small population, so only 12 pupils took part in data analysis again, as you'll see on the next slide. The qualitative was the emerging themes, quotes and samples, answers that were asked to the pupils and the teachers. And the quantitative are shown through graphs and statistics within the next slide. So, as you can see from diagram 1 here, this was reported that 77% of the pupils could correctly identify what effort level, so from 1 to 5, their self or their partner peer were working at. So when the pupils were working in pairs, 77% of the pupils knew exactly what level they were working at from 1 to 5. The pie chart also highlighted 9% of the pupils estimated one effort level below, and 14% of the pupils assessed that they were working at a higher level. So again, 77% is still a very big for year 7. And within figure number 2, this is on the peer and self-assessment predictions. So from this is evident that the peer assessment is more reliable, with 77% again of the pupils predicting their grades, and only 14 and 9% underestimating their performance. And finally, the teacher and pupils' preferred assessment strategies. So this is the big one that we were looking at and we find our most information on. This showed pupils' responses relevant and even selection of using teacher, self and peer assessments, as you can see throughout. Okay, so it was even marked with 33% in each of them. When talking to the teachers that took part in this, they preferred the more teacher assessment as opposed to self or peer. I think because they would get a better overview of it and they could see themselves what they were looking for. Okay, these are just some comments made within the questionnaire on what was most preferred. So, teacher again, because I trust my own judgment and my knowledge of the activity, so that I am better than the student. So today there's a lot more information. For example, we're talking within boxing. Teacher again, it is useful when people are doing the same activity, and therefore can judge it better. Another one for self. You can judge yourself good, smart, even if you are bad. If you might have some good techniques in some of them, but you might be a little bit lower in the other one. So, just moving on to the structure now. So, as you can see here, we talked about the research of objective 1. So, it works this way down here. When talking to the people, 100% will benefit from using self and peer assessment strategies. 87% of the people are confident in their knowledge of the peer grading criteria. Because a lot of the time, a lot of the grading criteria are all over the walls in the things in the course, so you know exactly what level they're working to towards. 100% of the people, they're using various instruments to develop understanding of the peer grading criteria. So again, peer assessment group, self-assessment group, and the iPad again are a big thing as well. So, majority of the people estimate the correct working level and attainment effort attainment on effort. So 70.5% estimated exactly what level they were working on. And then move on up here. The majority of people were able to highlight strengths and areas to develop. Again, this is based on able to be able to highlight exactly what your strengths are and how they can develop. So you don't have to say weaknesses, you want to know areas that they can develop on. So again, this is going to focus on the things you will see in a couple of years' time. This is going to improve on it. These are most effective in the peer assessment when predicting effort. And then 29% of the people estimating there was one level, so it said either below or above. With our second research objective, accuracy and reliability of peer and self-assessment strategy B. Each strategy is selected 33% of the time, so we're sort of like a consistent, they like to use consistent strategies. As I said earlier, teachers are using their own teacher assessments, but recognize the importance of all strategies. To conclude this, a combination of the teacher self and peer assessment is effective in key lessons. So this is coming now nearly to the end of our research. So research objective 1. This is
they're more comfortable giving feedback on their partner rather than themselves. Peer self-assessment itself acts as a reliable way to access people and should be put into every unit of work for this group. So the second research objective, people have been doing research support, they like to use a variety of different assessment strategies within a unit of work. The majority of the teachers, as I said, prefer to use their own assessment because they're interested in understanding and knowledge on this. The limitations within this, following the research assessment, while the people change is increased, often more peer self-assessment is included within the lesson. Let's move on to the second last slide, recommendations. So additional quantitative data to be used to promote the use of peer self-assessment within key lessons. So not just at the end of the year, to do it within every lesson. Wider mix of population to again use more people to do different year groups. Train students specifically on levels and criteria for success. So as again, when it comes up to GCSE, they know exactly what they need to get to a level 10 or 7 or 10 marks for the GCSE. It gives students options of assessment strategy to what different assessment strategy would they like to use. And also each one is different, so very infinite to peer assessment groups maybe someday when I use the iPad and family assessment. And finally, the impact of the research. My personal understanding of this, development of peer assessment takes time, planning, and commitment, as you're well aware. A lot of teachers are on full timetables, so they don't really have a lot of time to do out peer and self-assessment piece. Peer self-assessment needs to be an integrated part of the unit of work to accommodate the needs of each pupil. Pupils also enjoy undertaking new roles, such as teaching and coach or referee, for example. In the future, peer self-assessment strategies will be implemented into every unit of work, hopefully. Pupils need to ensure they are fully aware of the criteria, for example, if we should exactly know what teaching points are, the learning objectives, and learning outcomes by the end of the lesson. Understanding of the demonstration of students. Project also develops students' ability to work independently as they self-assess and peer assess, as well as their different strategies and ability to quickly analyze performance. School impact. Hopefully the school will understand the benefits of engaging pupils in peer and self-assessment, especially in that because they take a lot of time to do within that. This will also develop more opportunities within teams to engage peer and self-assessment. Hopefully teaching will use the research in which people coach and how they are assessed. So that's the reason. Any questions this is good? I'm not any queries or no queries, I think it's good for all of this is quite a lot of work because this is a bit more
practicing. So I think we've got to utilise them strategies more in PE because I think the problem with lots of PE lessons is that there's a definite beginning to the lesson and an end point to the lesson. Now if we do a lot more assessment and there's a greater understanding of the skill or the concepts that make good sport performance, the lesson, when we stop the lesson, their own development can continue away from the lesson, which then we feed back into the next lesson. And by doing that, we should see a clear progression in sport performance.
That's great. Thank you for that.
Okay, you're very welcome.